Her Spirits Rising to Playfulness, written by P.O. Dixon, read by Christopher. Chapter 1. Netherfield Park, Autumn 1811. Elizabeth Bennet sauntered slowly through the grounds of Netherfield Park by herself, the sun's warmth against her chin and her loose bonnet brushing her shoulders. She was unmoved by the beauty surrounding her. The peaceful chirping of birds was nothing more than faint background noise in her mind. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Spending time with people who disliked her as much as she disliked them was a test of her endurance. Solitary rambles afforded her a much-needed reprieve. Elizabeth suffered a combination of vexation and dread when she thought about having to endure yet another evening with those who disapproved of her. She had already put up with so much of their thinly disguised disdain since her arrival. In mere hours she must face yet another night in their presence. First, there were the Bingley sisters to contend with. The two had been all politeness and civility to Elizabeth's elder sister Jane, inviting her to Netherfield for tea, while the gentlemen dined with the officers. Neither they nor Jane could have foreseen the visit becoming such an extended stay, but by her mother's contrivance, Jane fell ill and had to remain at Netherfield while recuperating. After learning about Jane's prognosis, Elizabeth arrived the next day to care for her sister. The Bingley sisters had been so kind to her when she first came. They were eager to please, and their decorum and knowledge were admirable. Nevertheless, Elizabeth had occasionally wondered at them, and now she could not help but think she was being judged. She was aware of every curious glance cast her way. They carefully scrutinized each movement she made with an arched eyebrow. A rebuking assessment of her character marked each departure from their company. Were Elizabeth to rely solely upon their brother's friend, Mr. Darcy, she would say with certainty she was not only being judged but also deemed severely wanting. She could never forget his initial assessment of her the first time they met at the Meryton Assembly, when she overheard him remark to his friend that she was barely tolerable, and not handsome enough to tempt him. Every time she noticed him looking at her since, she surmised he was doing so merely to bolster his original opinion. And then there was Mr. Bingley himself, the amiable gentleman from the north, who had recently let Netherfield, or, as otherwise referred to by her eager matchmaking mother, a single man with a large fortune who stood in dire need of a wife. Fortunately, the gentleman was half in love with her elder sister, which must undoubtedly bode well for Jane's future felicity. Elizabeth stepped lightly along the path, gazing at the manor house before her. She exhaled, deciding that visiting the library would be an excellent way to distract her mind and find something else to occupy her thoughts. When she arrived at the library doors, she was immediately enveloped by its warm embrace of knowledge. The scent of old leather bindings and aged paper filled her nostrils. A serene smile graced her countenance as she meandered among the shelves. She gracefully ran her slender fingers along their spines, intently seeking any book to capture her curiosity. The Netherfield library was scant at best. Most of the books were old and dusty, with covers worn with age. Only a few were new and inviting. A particular book caught Elizabeth's eye, and she pulled it from its place on the shelf. As she read, she found herself completely lost in a world of words where endless possibilities awaited around every corner. Her worries faded away until all that remained was vivid imagery spreading across page after page of beautiful prose. Stretching her arms over her head, Elizabeth emerged from her reverie some time later. What had been a dull afternoon has become quite interesting indeed. By now, she was sure Jane must be wondering where she'd gone for so long. Elizabeth closed the book and was about to place it back on the shelf when she heard two gentlemen enter the library. She recognised one of the voices as Mr. Darcy's and the other as Mr. Bingley's. From the sound of the conversation, they were clearly discussing Mr. Bingley and Jane. With heightened curiosity and wishing to know more, Elizabeth concealed herself behind the stately mahogany shelves, eyeing the two cautiously and listening intently to their discourse. She noticed a haughty officiousness on Mr. Darcy's face as he sat in one of the imposing library chairs. His companion listened intently as Mr. Darcy extolled the disadvantages of pursuing a relationship with a young woman whose circumstances in life were so poor and further-sighted that it was only sensible for a gentleman to take his time to meet a young woman who was worthy of him. A stifled gasp was quickly cut off as Elizabeth covered her mouth with her hand, muffling the sound that tried to escape. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her body froze with an uncomfortable mixture of outrage and disbelief. The steady hum of conversation increased in volume as the two men debated this matter, and the intensity of their disagreement soon increased. The room seemed suddenly much smaller than it had when Elizabeth first arrived. Aware of the tension in the air, she found the conversation kept returning to one individual, her elder sister, Jane. Elizabeth's eyes darted between the two men, her mind alert to every nuance in their exchange, until finally Mr. Darcy cleared his throat and stood. He spoke with such strength that the library walls reverberated with his conviction. "You astonish me, Bingley," said Mr. Darcy with a hint of annoyance. "You have known her for only 3 weeks and are already considering making her an offer of matrimony? I dare say she will never be such a wife as she should be. Finding a suitable match must take precedence over sentimentalism and other such things. You must not be blinded by foolish passion or be beguiled by a pretty face." The words reverberating through the air were enough to send a chill down poor Elizabeth's spine. The proud yet aloof Fitzwilliam Darcy spoke of her beloved elder sister with such contempt, humiliation, and scorn evident in his every word. She shrank back, wishing she could disappear from the library before she was caught eavesdropping. The words Elizabeth heard from Mr. Darcy shocked and appalled her. How could he be so insensitive and disrespectful? "Jane is an angel in my estimation. She's gentle and kind and has a heart of gold." It was difficult for her not to interrupt them and express her opinion. Still, she kept her mouth shut and listened to the two men argue about the merits of a love match. "No," replied Mr. Bingley, his countenance betraying signs of vexation. "I have not communicated the depth of my feelings to her in any explicit manner. I cannot deny that her beauty has captivated me, but this emotion I now feel is of a kind I am quite unfamiliar with." Mr. Darcy's countenance became most severe. "Indeed, sir, you lack understanding of the fairer sex. To comprehend their true worth and beauty, one must be privy to the inner workings of their delicate nature, and even then there is no certainty." Bingley stood up and looked Mr. Darcy in the eye. "I know what I feel. I'm not a fool, and I believe I am capable of knowing what is right for me. Bingley, I dare say Miss Bennet would not be a suitable wife for you. She does not possess the wealth or standing in society that some might favour for you. She suffers from the lack of proper accomplishments that a young lady of status should possess. I do not understand why you are so fond of her. I assure you, Darcy, Jane is all I could wish for in a wife. The qualities she possesses are those I esteem most highly. I think she is just what a young woman ought to be. I am confident she is in every way suited to be my future companion. I contend she is not worthy of you, Bingley. How can you even contemplate marrying her without the question of money, which is the most important thing? How can I help it? I have the greatest regard for her. I love her dearly, and I know she will reciprocate my feelings. I love her, Darcy, and I know you are concerned for me, but I can assure you she will be a good wife. She will be faithful and devoted." Mr. Darcy replied with a slightly raised brow. "You are too romantic, Bingley. You do not consider all the ramifications of such a decision." "I have made up my mind, Darcy. I mean to be engaged to be married to Miss Bennet in under a month, 2 months at the most, but not a minute beyond that." Mr. Darcy eyed him with concern. "I am aware of the consequences," Bingley continued. "Perhaps I am not considering all of them. Perhaps I am blind to what is important. All I know is that I love her. I know she loves me too." Darcy sighed heavily. "Bingley, please, I beg of you. You're throwing your life away. You're a gentleman. You will rise in society. You will marry a lady with an excellent family and money. Of that I am certain if you will but be patient. You shall have years to decide. I will marry a girl whom I love, and I know she loves me. I hope you will come to your senses, Darcy. I further hope you will not continue in your prejudices regarding my beloved Jane. When you become better acquainted with her, I trust your sentiments will change." Mr. Darcy shook his head. "When you let Netherfield Park, however impulsively done, I thought surely you were taking steps towards securing your place in society as a proper gentleman. Not only is marrying a young woman with no fortune and want of connections a detriment to your future standing, but it would place an undue burden on you, what with her family's tenuous situation, 4 unwed sisters with meagre dowries, I suspect, a silly mother, and a neglectful father whose estate is entailed to the male line of the family. The Bennets are but a mere breath away from destitution. You, on the other hand, have a bright future ahead of you. So why would you want to throw it away for a young woman like Miss Bennet? Are you certain that she deserves such a sacrifice?" Mr. Darcy's words pierced through Elizabeth's heart like a dagger. A breath away from destitution? Such a sacrifice? Is my dearest sister undeserving of loving and being loved in return by an honourable man, even if he is wealthy? Elizabeth had never heard such a harsh appraisal of her family and could hardly bear the burning disgust that filled her chest. Mr. Darcy's cold and calculating tones made her sister seem like a mere object, someone to be disdained for daring to think she might rise above her class. Elizabeth could not believe that the man she had initially disliked for his arrogance, pride, and aloofness could be so apathetic and blind to the power of love. She was livid and appalled by Mr. Darcy's words, and had to strive to restrain her anger. She wanted to defend her beloved sister, her family, and Jane's honour, but she held her tongue. All she could do was stand there in silent protest, watching as the two men argued and debated the weight of Mr. Bingley's conviction. It was nearly too much for her to take. "My esteem for your judgment is unbounded, my dear Darcy," said Bingley, "but in this matter, I fear I cannot assent to your opinion. Miss Bennet is a lady of the utmost excellence and virtue. If you disapprove of her, that is your opinion, and your right. Shall we then agree to disagree? My purpose is determined, and I shall not be swayed from it." "I will agree to table this discussion for now," said Mr. Darcy, a slight yet determined edge to his voice. "It may be productive to evaluate our differences of opinion on the green baize of the billiards-room, but if I should prove victorious in such a trial, you shall concede to abandon the scheme of allying yourself with that most disagreeable family." "I shall gladly join you for a round of billiards, my friend, for I cannot think of a better way to pass the time until Miss Bennet joins us in the drawing-room after dinner. As for the outcome of your proposed wager, I dare not entertain such a notion." "We shall see," Mr. Darcy said, preparing to quit the room, unaware that Elizabeth had heard it all. Elizabeth watched, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard too much. "It is abundantly clear to me that Mr. Darcy disapproves of my sister, but what right does he have to critique her in such a callous manner?" When she could, Elizabeth, agitated and confused, made her way from the library's bookshelves. It took all her control not to confront Mr. Darcy and admonish him about his despicable behaviour. Instead, she had to remind herself that he was a guest in his friend's home, just as she and her sister were, and she had to remain hospitable. Nevertheless, the injustice of the situation had thoroughly roused her indignation. "My sister deserves more respect than the proud man afforded her. I am determined to make him see that, no matter what it takes." Chapter 2. Elizabeth stomped around her bedroom, her rage and indignation boiling up from within. She had been trying to quell the flames of anger burning through her soul, but the remembered injustice of her sister's plight fed the fury even more. She could not understand how anyone could be so callous as to reject someone without giving them a chance. Mr. Darcy's insistence that Jane was not good enough belittled the connection she saw between Jane and Mr. Bingley, and the thought of that made her blood boil. The injustice of it all filled her pores with righteous anger, and she became more agitated with every step she took. How she despised Mr. Darcy and those of his ilk who were so fixated on rank and prestige that they lost sight of what truly mattered in life: kindness, respect, and compassion for one another. Elizabeth continued to pace, but succumbed to exhaustion, as her fiery energy slowly ebbed away. Finally she fell back onto her bed, still fuming with anger at the memory of Mr. Darcy's harsh words directed at Jane. Her mind was a swirl of sentiments as she tried to make some sense of the situation. Anger, hurt, and humiliation were all mixed in a turbulent storm of thoughts. She turned over in her bed, determined to find some sort of resolution to the situation that had so rapidly and unexpectedly unfolded. Just as Elizabeth was about to drift off into an inevitable restless sleep, an idea came to her. She immediately sat upright, her gaze piercing the darkness as she worked out the details in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more she realised that the solution was quite clear. She could make Mr. Darcy pay for his harshness towards Jane through shrewd, meticulous manipulation of his own sensibilities. She rose from the bed and began pacing back and forth across her room, her nightgown billowing behind her. Her plan was simple: make him fall in love with her, and then reject him. Her plan had a certain elegance to it. However, she knew a host of challenges would come with it. Mr. Darcy was a proud man. It would be difficult to make someone so proud and arrogant submit to her whims. But Elizabeth was determined and confident she could do it, supposing he was even capable of falling in love, which was yet to be seen. By the time she returned to Longbourn, implementing her scheme was her favourite wish. She would have liked to hash out her scheme with her elder sister, but she did not dare for fear of how Jane would react. The latter being more forgiving than Elizabeth, she might very well disapprove. Thus Elizabeth kept her own counsel until she could consult like-minded company, namely her intimate friend Miss Charlotte Lucas from the neighbouring estate, Lucas Lodge. Elizabeth confided in her friend her ambitious scheme for obtaining a marriage proposal when she could. Though Charlotte had advanced to 27 years of age without making any matrimonial prospects for herself, her intelligence and acumen were unsurpassed. Or so Elizabeth supposed, when it came to helping her devise the most advantageous course of action to ensure her success in reaching her goal. "How very intriguing," Charlotte uttered, her eyes alight with curiosity. "How may I be of help?" "As a woman of sound judgment, I thought it prudent to entreat your opinion on how to best set my plan into motion." "What then is your scheme?" Charlotte questioned. "Alas, I have none planned as yet. That is to say, while I am clear on the outcome, the means of bringing it about have yet to be determined. Pray, how does a young woman go about enticing a man to tender his offer of marriage?" Elizabeth's countenance expressed her utter despair. Charlotte uttered gently but curiously, "Pray tell me, why did you not simply request advice from your mother? I am certain that she would know how best to proceed." Elizabeth's mother, Mrs. Francine Bennet née Gardiner, was a woman of limited knowledge and uncertain temper, whose life's purpose was to marry off her 5 daughters. Her heart was invariably in the right place, but her means were sometimes questionable. "Heavens forbid! If my mother gets a whiff of my plan, she will organise the entire nuptials before I realise what has occurred." Elizabeth shuddered. "A prospect I would find most unsettling, for I have no intention of getting married." "If I understand you correctly, you hope to receive a marriage proposal, though you have no intention of being swayed by it." "Indeed, that is my precise meaning. I will never return this particular gentleman's affections, as he is the last man I would consider accepting as my husband." "Indeed, your audacity is commendable. However, I do not comprehend your stratagem. Why would you go to the trouble of getting a marriage proposal without intending to accept it?" "It appears rather peculiar," Charlotte uttered with a tilt of her head. "Explaining the matter to you is likely to be the most straightforward part of the whole affair," Elizabeth stated with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "Very well, then. So what is it you are attempting to accomplish?" Charlotte asked. "My primary aim is to secure the notice of a certain gentleman of fine standing. I must draw him in and secure his affections, and only then can I spurn his advances," she uttered, with a coy smile. Charlotte's brows rose in astonishment. "So you intend to have the gentleman make an offer of marriage and then refuse him?" "Precisely." "It is not at all like you to engage in such folly. You must really detest this man." "Oh, I do. I really do." "Who is the gentleman in question?" "That would be Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy." Charlotte's eyes sparkled with surprise. "Oh my, so it is to be a game of vanity. Is this your way of assuaging your wounded pride because he declared you not handsome enough to tempt him? You want to show the gentleman that his wealth and social status cannot tempt you. That is very brave of you, my dear Eliza. It was not merely the insult to me that has put me in such a perturbation of spirit. It was a more recent affront against my dearest sister Jane. Charlotte, you cannot possibly imagine what he has done." "What has he done?" "I overheard him vehemently argue with his friend Mr. Bingley that the idea of making an offer of marriage to Jane had to be abandoned, for he finds our family's lack of fortune and want of connections an insurmountable impediment. It was all I could do not to run up to him and demand an explanation for such abhorrent behaviour." Charlotte gasped. "You must have been so hurt and disappointed. What an insult against your sister. It is incomprehensible how anyone can be so callous." "That is true, and I vow no mercy for him. That is why I am determined to discover a way to exact revenge. I do not wish to accept an offer from him. I only want to make him suffer the humiliation of being rejected by a Bennet daughter." Charlotte shook her head. "It is a daring plan, Eliza. Can you, with surety, resolve to take such a course?" Elizabeth nodded resolutely. My determination is set, and I shall need assistance in my endeavour. Will you support me?" Charlotte smiled in assent. "I perfectly comprehend your feelings and am ready to help you with whatever I can. Let us devise an approach that will draw the notice of Mr. Darcy." After a moment's reflection, Charlotte devised a plan of attack. "I believe, my dear," she said, "to set the stage for an offer, a most delicate balance must be struck. You once argued that dancing is the best means of encouraging affection, did you not? You must find ways to employ that stratagem. If you get such an opportunity, like a Scottish reel at an informal gathering, seize it. Additionally, affectionate gazes from across the room on your part may effectively set the stage. Perhaps a stroll through a garden, or a pleasant jaunt to some other pleasing location, Oakham Mount, for instance, would afford intimacy conducive to your purpose. But you must be careful not to be too obvious in your intentions, for that could jeopardize the entire endeavour." Elizabeth nodded in agreement. "Your advice is most sensible. What other steps should I take, pray tell?" "Bestow simple tokens of endearment," Charlotte replied with a smile. "Listen to his words with enthusiasm. Even the slightest brush of your hand against his arm should suffice. Ensure he is always aware that you are in his presence, yet do not be imprudent or aggressive. Nay, too much familiarity could have an adverse effect on him." "To put it another way," Elizabeth began, her spirits rising to playfulness, "observe how Miss Bingley behaves, and then do the complete opposite." Her friend chuckled. "Exactly. Thank you, Charlotte. That is excellent advice. I think I have the makings of a plan now. Though I will not venture to speak of my expectations, I shall do everything within my power to ensure its success." Charlotte let out a sigh. "Well then, you have a considerable task ahead of you. I suspect Mr. Darcy is a proud, grave man who is not easily won over. I do not envy you this mission." "That I must play a subtle game is certain," said Elizabeth, "but I am undeterred in my resolution to succeed." "You will be called upon to exercise a great degree of strategy," Charlotte returned. "How can I be of service?" "I require your aid as my confidant. I need someone to vent to and seek advice as I execute my plan. I dare not trick myself into thinking my scheme is easy. Indeed, I agree that Mr. Darcy is not easily swayed by emotion, his nature being one of pride and reserve. Then we must tailor our course of action to his temperament. You shall show him the error of his ways with your wit and discernment. No doubt it shall be your greatest victory." Elizabeth smiled her agreement. "It shall indeed." "Allow me then to be an ally in your pursuit of justice," Charlotte offered with a genuine smile of encouragement. "Thank you, Charlotte," Elizabeth said gratefully. "Your friendship means so much to me, and I cannot express how much I value it." Charlotte reached out and gave Elizabeth's hand a gentle squeeze. "It is my honour to be of service. Let's huddle together and map out a plan of action." Having sought and received input from her friend, Elizabeth finalised her scheme. She knew that the gentleman, Mr. Darcy, was used to getting his way and having everything go according to his plan. So she decided the best way to catch his attention was to be unpredictable and not follow his expectations. "I simply need to speak my mind more openly, especially if it means going against Mr. Darcy's opinions, even if it means going against my own. Anything to challenge him and pique his interest. I shall also make a point of showing off my wit and intelligence, as I suspect Mr. Darcy values such qualities in a woman." Elizabeth knew that if her plan were to succeed, she'd first have to get close enough to Mr. Darcy for him to form any attachment toward her. While this could prove difficult considering their past interactions, Elizabeth also knew that Mr. Darcy already had a certain level of interest in her, even if it was merely to find fault. "If I play my cards right, I can use this peculiar interest against him and eventually bend him to my will." With renewed determination, she threw herself into hammering out the details of her scheme. Convincing someone as proud and arrogant as Mr. Darcy to fall in love was a task that no woman before her had likely accomplished. But Elizabeth had faith in herself, and was confident that with some ingenuity she might just succeed. Elizabeth was abuzz with energy as she contemplated her new mission. She had never experienced this kind of emotion before. It was exhilarating. Love was something that she had always thought of as spontaneous and uncontrollable. "Can I really make him fall in love with me?" Elizabeth thought to herself, her determination fueled at the idea of carrying out such a feat. She knew it was an uphill battle, and there would be moments when she would feel like giving up. But she refused to allow such insecurities to stop her. reminding herself that even if it didn't work out, she could at least say she had tried. "Yes," she whispered to herself, a newfound courage in her voice. "I can do this." Chapter 3. The idea of marrying the eldest Bennet daughter was so well fixed in Bingley's mind that he invited the entire family to dine at Netherfield, not 3 days since the 2 Bennet daughters had returned to Longbourn. Darcy was walking in the garden, his means of escaping Bingley's guests for the evening, when he heard the voices of 2 women, Miss Elizabeth and Miss Bennet. He paused and listened in confusion when he heard them discussing a scheme that centred on him. First, Elizabeth was plotting to make him fall in love with her, her way of avenging his supposed offences against her elder sister. Then she planned to reject him when he proposed, leaving him humiliated. To Miss Bennet's credit, this appeared to be her first time hearing of her sister's plans, and, as best he could surmise, she was not entirely in favour of such a stratagem. But that did not lessen its sting. A wave of indignation roared through his veins. How dare Elizabeth Bennet toy with him like that? His heart sank like a stone as he heard her words. Of all the people of Hertfordshire, he thought she had seen the better part of him. Yet here she was talking of such a plan, the one woman who had captivated him like no other before her. Then something inside him shifted, and he felt inspired to prove his worth to her. If she wants to use me for her amusement, I will use this situation to show her I am so much more than an arrogant man who judges others for their social standing. As Darcy stepped out of the shadows, the Bennet sisters were startled and they gasped. Elizabeth looked at him with surprise and a hint of fear in her eyes. He straightened himself up and tried to appear as confident as possible. Challenge accepted. "Miss Bennet, Miss Elizabeth," he said, bowing slightly. "I hope you don't mind my interrupting." He looked at Jane and continued, "But your mother was wondering what had become of you. I volunteered to come in search of you." Jane was gone directly, leaving Darcy and Elizabeth standing there. His gaze intently settled on Elizabeth. He said, "If you're in the mood for a bit of fun and games, Miss Elizabeth, what say you to a chess match? I know how much you enjoy cunning tactics and other stratagems, and I dare say I have a few tricks up my sleeve." Elizabeth's mouth gaped, unsure whether he had overheard her and her sister. He smiled inside at her confusion, and upon receiving her assent by way of a nod, he turned and walked away into the darkness of night, a satisfied smirk on his face. For the next hour the 2 of them played chess. For Elizabeth the game was both an emotional and a mental trial, for she had to remain focused on the game and battle her emotional insecurities, embarrassment, uncertainty and confusion. Had he overheard her speaking with Jane or not? And if he had, why had he not confronted her? Mr. Darcy was utterly unreadable to her, wearing his mask of indifference well, focusing entirely on the game and its complexities. Eventually, what seemed like a close victory for Elizabeth turned out to be a victory for Mr. Darcy. He had made a move she hadn't seen coming, and she had been backed into a corner. When Elizabeth thanked him for the game, she felt a sudden spark when she and Mr. Darcy exchanged glances. She knew that things had shifted in the air between them, but she wasn't sure if it was her imagination or something more. Mr. Darcy exited without another word, leaving Elizabeth to mull over what had just happened between them. Could she have made progress in her mission to make him fall in love with her so soon? What else could she do to melt his frozen heart? As these thoughts raced through her mind, she felt a shiver of anticipation. Whatever comes next, I am ready for it. Chapter 4. The walls of the assembly room seemed to close in around Darcy as he stepped inside. His heart raced. This was the second time he'd attended such a gathering. This time, he wanted to be there. The clicking of heels against the floor sent a ripple of anticipation down his spine. His eyes scanned the crowd for Elizabeth, the young lady who had contrived a plan to humiliate him. If he did not know it before, he certainly knew it at that moment. Elizabeth possessed an intelligence and a strength that he had never encountered in a young woman. She was not the first female who sought to manipulate his feelings, but she was the first to attempt such a ruse with revenge as her sole motive. He was simultaneously repulsed and enthralled. He spotted her talking with some friends and couldn't help but marvel at her loveliness, her bewitching eyes, her light and pleasing figure. He couldn't take his eyes off her, watching with admiration as she moved gracefully through the crowd, engaging with friends and acquaintances along the way. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, determined to make his way toward her. When he reached her side, he cleared his throat to garner her attention. "Mr. Darcy," she said, "we meet again." Recommending himself to strangers had never been his strong suit, but Elizabeth was hardly a stranger, and if he was going to improve her opinion of him by showing her a more amiable side of himself, he had better say something. He didn't know what to say, and if she hadn't stepped closer, he was not sure he could have managed. The closer she got, the more he could make out how her lips curled up into a slight smirk, like she knew something he didn't. "Miss Elizabeth," he finally said, mustering all his strength so as not to let her see how her presence affected him. Elizabeth's lips tightened into a thin line before her expression softened slightly. "I hope your seeking me out means we will resume our amiable accord from our last evening at Netherfield." Mr. Darcy nodded approvingly. "I hope so too." A moment passed before Elizabeth sighed and continued. "In that spirit, sir, I shall expect the honour of standing opposite you at least once this evening, if not twice. I say this despite knowing how much you dislike dancing, especially in such an assembly as this. What say you?" "I say you are very bold." "Oh, I am nothing if not bold and determined. I dare say it would surprise you to know the lengths I will go to in order to get my way. So she is determined to carry on with her little ruse." Darcy felt a sudden rush of determination of his own flooding through him. If Elizabeth was intent on behaving in such a fashion, he would show her what it meant to be truly in control by exhibiting unparalleled patience and respect despite her apparent contempt for him. Half wishing to put an end to their subterfuge and half knowing it was not the time, not until he had accomplished his own goal, he said, "I have no doubt of your belief in your convictions and your strength of determination, Miss Elizabeth. I admire that about you." He paused for a beat before continuing, his voice softer than before. "But remember that no matter how much one might try to control things, it doesn't always work out the way one plans." Darcy took a step closer to her and leaned in. "No matter one's good intentions," he concluded. For a moment he thought he saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in her eyes, before she stepped back and nodded. "I understand, Mr. Darcy. I shall treasure your wise words." The two of them stood in a charged silence before Elizabeth tore her eyes from his. "I shall see you on the dance floor then, sir," she said before walking away. Mr. Darcy watched her as she retreated, filled with admiration at her poise and resolve. She had no idea he was keenly playing his own game too, to win her good opinion. As for what might happen next, it was up to fate to decide. Thank you for listening to Her Spirits Rising to Playfulness, chapters 1 through 4. If you have enjoyed this story thus far, and I hope you have, you will not want to miss what happens next. Subscribe to this channel today and be among the first to be notified when Her Spirits Rising to Playfulness, the complete audiobook, is available for your listening pleasure. And be sure to search for and listen to more of my stories like this one, stories that will make you fall in love time and time again. Your continuing support helps this channel grow,